So, Darkstalkers. Also known as Vampire in Japan, the game consisted of many colorful and interesting characters based on monsters from international folklore. Seeing it followed Capcom's breakout fighting game franchise, the game has sometimes been referred to as Street Fighter in a Halloween costume. While Darkstalkers obviously didn't match the commercial success of notable Capcom titles such as Street Fighter and the Marvel vs. Capcom series, elements of its gameplay managed to influence future installments of the aforementioned games, as well as fighting games outside of Capcom. Though Darkstalkers hasn't released an original game since 1997, the game is far from forgotten, and part of that is due to the continued presence of one of its most recognizable characters, Morrigan. Like many a character I've done one of these videos on, Morrigan needs no introduction. Even if you know next to nothing about Darkstalkers, you've seen her somewhere. Lover or a hater, a character like Morrigan is unforgettable, with an enduring presence that has spanned decades. These are 10 fascinating facts about Morrigan. Number 1, the Vampire Crossover Queen. Speaking of enduring presence, I'm sure you know that Morrigan has made loads of crossover appearances in fighting games. She was the first from the Darkstalkers series to break out and cross over into the Marvel vs. Capcom series, debuting in MVC1 and being the sole Darkstalkers representative on the playable roster if you don't count her palette swap Lilith. Morrigan would make playable appearances in every MVC game afterwards, being accompanied by at least one other Darkstalkers character on the roster. In both versions of Tatsunoko vs. Capcom, my favorite Capcom crossover fighter, Morrigan is the sole playable Darkstalkers character, no technicalities, no exceptions, no questions asked. She's also the sole playable Darkstalkers representative in both installments of Capcom vs. SNK. In SNK vs. Capcom, the match of the Millennium, Felicia and BB Hood accompanied her as playable characters. Morrigan has even appeared in numerous non-fighting games, including tactical RPGs like Namco Cross Capcom and Project Cross Zone 1 and 2, puzzle games like Super Puzzle Fighter 2 Turbo, card games like SNK vs. Capcom Card Fighter Clash, mobile games like Street Fighter Battle Combination, and even in a browser-based social card game, Unimusha Soul. So many games. There are more, but I think with this entry, you get the picture. Can't go wrong with putting Morrigan in your games. Number 2, record-breaking reusage. I mean, when you've remained in the limelight longer than your home game that hasn't had an original installment in over a decade, you've gotta break some records along the way. And Morrigan did just that, albeit depending on your perspective, the honor may be somewhat dubious. Acknowledged by the Gamers Edition of the Guinness World Records, Morrigan holds the record for the most reused character sprite in a fighting game, with said sprite making appearances across 10 different games. The same sprite she debuted with in the original 1994 Darkstalkers game would be the same one she'd have all the way up to Capcom vs. SNK 2 in 2001. Knowing this and the fact that she was the only Darkstalkers rep in CVS2, a game in which several longtime fighting game characters got their sprites touched up, you could imagine how out of place she looked visually. Morrigan also had the same voice actress for just as long, if not a bit longer, as the late Yayoi Jinguji played her from her 94 debut up until her 2008 appearance in Tatsunoko vs. Capcom. Speaking of TVC, as I'm sure you know, this game marked the end of the lifelong sprite reusing streak for Morrigan, as she got a proper 3D model. Number 3, polarizing adaptations. Being as iconic as she is, Morrigan was bound to have some rather questionable portrayals in other media adaptations. The Udon comics are one of the most polarizing due to being unfaithful to the source material. In the Udon Darkstalkers comics, Morrigan is an immensely malevolent, evil succubus, hell-bent on visiting the human realm for the sole purpose of consuming human souls and dreams. She entirely disregards her duty as a future ruler of the Makai realm, causing friction with her father Belial. The reception of this portrayal of Morrigan has been split, with some highly objecting to it and some not finding it all that problematic. The portrayal that all, if not most, would agree was downright awful, wait for it, Darkstalkers, the animated series. Oh boy! Oddly enough, this American animated adaptation portrayed Morrigan with immensely negative characteristics akin to that of the Udon comics, albeit insufferably much worse. She was envious, uncouth, power-hungry, and highly misanthropic, harboring a special hatred for men. She's stated to be a direct descendant of Morgan Le Fay and was placed opposite of Harry Grimoire, the protagonist, whom is stated to be a descendant of Merlin. Many were also critical of how she was designed in that series, with Games Radar comparing her to the Wicked Witch of the West. Number 4, her influence on Skullgirls. While Skullgirls really isn't a horror-themed fighting game, it's clear that Darkstalkers had some influence on it when you consider most of the cast's wacky characters and animations. I mean, Peacock literally summons Shinko's Tenraiha by dropping it from the sky. Morrigan is given several shoutouts and is cited as an influence on several characters in the series. Eliza's outfit-changing wind pose is based on Morrigan's wind pose doing the same thing. Morrigan was even listed as a gameplay influence on a couple of characters who are unfortunately not playable at the time of recording. One such character is Deep Violet, the alter ego of Mrs. Victoria, the teacher you see in the class note stage. She assumes the guise of D. Violet to stalk and hunt down crime in the dark of night. Also, D. Violet does bear some resemblance to Succubus. Morrigan is also cited as an influence on Venus, whose playstyle seems to hint at elements of body distortion. Venus is also a member of a triad known as the Divine Trinity, additionally consisting of her sister Aeon and an entity simply known as the Mother. Interestingly, Morrigan's namesake, the Irish goddess known as the Morrigan, is also described as a trio of goddesses, although all three goddesses of the Morrigan are sisters. Bonus fact, Morrigan, not the Morrigan, but just Morrigan, yes, that Morrigan, was initially set to have a triad of her own, consisting of an older half-sister and a brother named Belial Jr. This concept was scrapped, and her two potential siblings were later made into Lilith and Jeddah-Doma. There is one more interesting shoutout to Morrigan from Skullgirls, but I think it's better suited for the next entry. Number 5, everyone sure loves dressing up as her. Almost everyone from real-life cosplayers to fictional characters have dressed up like the seductive succubus. With such a distinctive and alluring appearance and design, as well as being an icon, it shouldn't come as a shock to see Morrigans at almost every nerd convention. Among a few notable cosplayers who have portrayed Morrigan include Jessica Nigri, Alodia Gosiengfiao, who calls it one of her favorite costumes, and one of my all-time favorites, Linda Lee, who you may know as VAMPY Bit Me, who not only stated Morrigan as one of her favorite costumes, but also one of her most ambitious. Morrigan was also the very first cosplay done by Judy Helsing. One of the most recent examples of fictional characters rocking Morrigan's signature outfit is Chun-Li in Street Fighter V, which, while cool, is a bit frustrating as it kinda sorta hints that Capcom sees value in Darkstalkers cosmetics, but not enough for a new game. Oh well. Frank West even jumps on the bandwagon in Dead Rising 4. When I said almost anyone, I meant it. Going back to the previous entry, there was concept art of Skullgirls as Cerebella dressed as Morrigan. Finally, in the parody anime Ultimate Girls, there's a scene in which one of the characters, Tsubomi, dresses up like Morrigan. Number 6, there can only be one. Like most other 90s kids who played this game before they were even slightly educated about mythological creatures, I initially thought Morrigan was a vampire. Once I understood she was a succubus, I found the prominence of bats around her rather unusual. The animal associated with her namesake, the Morrigan, is the crow. So what's up with the bats? Well, it turns out those of us who mistook her for a vampire weren't too far off the mark, as Morrigan was initially conceptualized as a vampire. Why'd they change it? For the sake of variety. Seeing that the game already had a vampire. Co-protagonist Dmitry Maximov. Number 7, Innocence Lost. The journey leading up to Morrigan's creation is filled with some fairly surprising switch-ups and swerves. Not only was Morrigan originally drawn up as a vampire, but an innocent vampire. In the Darkstalkers graphic file, it is noted that Vampire Morrigan was initially meant to be more of a cutesy character, perhaps intending to have the rather bubbly, fun-loving personality of Felicia. Possibly to go in conjunction with her provocative design, Felicia was originally set to have Morrigan's more sensuous personality. Of course, as the creators continued to develop Morrigan, they felt it was more befitting if the two characters had swapped personalities. Number 8, one of her early designs was very masculine. Our third and final stop on the journey of Morrigan's creation ends on a rather bizarre note. While there are some concept sketches that look quite close to the Morrigan we all know, there are a couple that may raise an eyebrow or two. Here's one where she's blonde with one of the typical vampiric hairstyles and outfits, has pale skin and claws. This concept made me think of one of the Harpy Lady sisters. Here's another one where she's still pale, but with blue hair and a different outfit with a seemingly sleeveless top. Personally, when I first saw this, I thought of Blair Dame. Finally, there's this one, and wow, it is quite a far cry. She's super muscular, has a rather revealing outfit with a cape, I'm guessing that white cloth is like a leg warmer, and some strange headgear that is quite reminiscent of Devilman. It wouldn't surprise me too much if that was the inspiration. In looking for inspiration for a horror-themed fighting game, Devilman is not a bad source to refer to. Number 9, filth, kinks, wordplay, and boy, Morrigan says a mouthful. Let me all take you to a non-fighting game that I really enjoy right quick. Paladins. Why am I randomly bringing up this hero shooter? Well, I don't have the evidence to prove this, but I'm sure Morrigan's smooth, sensual personality and her dirty double entendres inspired this demonic skin for support character Ceres. For example, when you saddle up on your mount, she says,
I love a good ride.
Whenever she gets stunned or frozen,
hit me again.
Whenever she gets shot in the back,
oh, from behind?
And finally, when she respawns,
are you getting tired? I can go all night.
Tell me that doesn't sound like straight up Morrigan foreplay wordplay.
I don't even know if that's PG.
If you ask me, while there were hints of filthy fun in Morrigan's quotes from the moment she debuted, Morrigan gets all the more raunchy in crossover games. If by chance you're unfamiliar with such Morrigan quips, welp, time for some of the greatest hits. When Shumagorath is the last character she KOs in UMVC 3, she remarks, my, what strong tentacles you have. I hope the party is just getting started. You can sit there and say I have a dirty mind, but come on, man. Capcom knew what they were doing. When she KOs Phoenix Wright for the win, quote, I see you like to run your mouth. I wonder if you can use it for anything else. If she likes loud lawyers, I think Apollo Justice would be more of her type. Finally, in MVCI, Morrigan taunts Thor, accusing him of losing his stamina from spending too much time gripping his hammer. Well, damn. Morrigan actually has one win quote that caught my attention that was more macabre than kinky. When she KOs Saki and Tatsunoko vs. Capcom for the win, she says, quote, taking something from someone is another way to show you love them. Now aim that gun at my heart and pull the trigger.
How romantic.
Number 10, the HD Remix Harbinger. Wow, I mean, just look at it. This is hella clean. This animation surfaced online via a post from Udon Entertainment's director of publishing, Matt Moylan, who reportedly found it on an old hard drive. It was created by visual artist Jeffrey Cruz, also known as Chamba, whom has also worked with companies including Bandai Namco, Marvel, DC Comics, Image Comics, and Disney. According to Moylan, this animation of Morrigan was the first in what was meant to be a collection of HD remix-style revamped Darkstalker sprites. Given the many outrageous, memorable animations in Darkstalkers, it would have been interesting to see them done in this style. With the recent news of Capcom not seeing the sales of the Capcom Fighting Collection possibly making way for a new Darkstalkers game, this was not how I wanted to end the video. Honestly, at this point, when Capcom said Darkstalkers are not dead, I feel like it was talking just about Morrigan. Despite the likelihood of a new Darkstalkers installment coming out further fading away, Morrigan is sure to still always be around. Though she's the big star of the franchise, the last 2 Marvel games have shown that she isn't above bringing some of her mates over with her as well. It's a shame that this will probably be the most we'll get from Darkstalkers in the future, but luckily, Morrigan continued to have enough star power to keep the game's legacy alive. And that is that. Do you know any other interesting facts about Morrigan? Please don't hesitate to share in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more videos in the future. I, of course, am Chris Lotus, signing off. You all take care of yourselves, be safe out there, be cool to each other. Cheers.